It took me far longer than it should have to understand that the most dangerous thing you can do with money is not lose it. People think the big dangers are obvious. A bad investment, a reckless acquisition, a tax mistake, a fraudster, a recession, a lawsuit, a market crash. Those things are real enough. I have seen all of them. I have watched smart people get hit by every one of them at one point or another. Some recovered, some never really did. But even now, after all these years, after all the cycles, after all the money I have seen built and all the money I have seen burned, I will tell you plainly that one danger sits quietly above the others, because it creates more damage with less effort. That danger is exposure. Not financial exposure in the usual sense. Social exposure, verbal exposure, emotional exposure. The moment you begin talking too freely about money, real money, your plans, your habits, your balance sheet, your intentions, the things you own, the things you are building, the methods that work for you, the good things you do for others. The shape of what happens after you die, you light a signal fire in the dark. And once that signal goes up, it does not just reach the people you intended, it reaches every hunger in the water. That is what most people never understand. They think silence is secrecy. They think silence is paranoia. They think silence is arrogance, or miserliness, or emotional coldness. It is none of those things. It is risk management. And if you ever hope to build wealth that lasts, not just money that flashes, then you need to understand the philosophy of financial silence as seriously as you understand investing, taxes, or business. I did not learn this from a textbook. No respectable school teaches it because schools like clean ideas and social approval. This idea is neither clean nor socially flattering. It has to be earned the slow way by watching what happens to people when they ignore it. I have seen fortunes damaged by one dinner conversation. I have seen family trees rot from the inside because one person decided that honesty about numbers was the same thing as wisdom. I have seen relationships that looked stable for 20 years change shape in a single weekend once the wrong person learned the wrong detail about what somebody had. And I have seen people who never made nearly as much money as others still keep more freedom, more peace, and more actual control over their lives, simply because they understood one principle earlier than the flashy crowd did. Wealth should compound. It should not announce itself. There is a mental model I want to give you because I think almost everything else in this conversation sits neatly inside it. I think of money as a flare. Imagine you are in dark water at night. If you are drowning, you fire a flare. That is what a flare is for. It attracts help. It tells the world where you are. It increases your visibility because invisibility in that moment is dangerous. But if you are not drowning, if you have a raft and supplies and a compass and enough calm to navigate, then firing the flare would be idiotic. Because a flare does not only attract rescue, it attracts attention. And in dark water, attention is not a single category. Some of it is good, some of it is neutral, some of it is predatory, some of it is desperate, some of it is simply hungry. The point is not that everything in the water is evil. The point is that the flare has no ability to discriminate once it leaves your hand. Money works the same way. When you signal it, when you talk about it, wear it too loudly, dramatize it, perform it, hint at it, confess it, celebrate it, complain about it, moralize about it, explain it, justify it, or compare it, you are not merely sharing information. You are changing the emotional weather around you. You are giving other people a ruler. You are telling them that a certain subject is now open, and once a subject is open, human beings begin doing what human beings have always done. They orient themselves around it. That is the signal problem. Most people think the danger is the bad people. The con artist, the thief, the manipulator, the cousin with the scheme, the acquaintance with the urgent need, the contractor who sees the watch and changes the number. Those people exist, and if you live long enough, you will meet a few. But what makes the signal problem so dangerous is that the majority of people who respond to your flare are not villains. They are ordinary people under ordinary pressure. They are your neighbors, your co-workers, your siblings, your children sometimes, your old college friends who remember another version of you and are now trying to reconcile that version with the one they suspect can help them. Good people, decent people, people with real bills and real worries and real deficits who suddenly see what looks like your surplus and begin, often unconsciously, calculating whether some of that surplus can solve some of what is pressing on them. They do not need to be bad to become dangerous to your peace. They only need to be human. Once you understand that, silence stops looking rude and starts looking intelligent. It becomes the most rational operating system available to you. Now I want to make this practical. There are 5 things I believe you must never share casually if you want your wealth to remain durable, your relationships to remain clean, and your freedom to remain yours. The first is the real number. Never let anyone know the actual number. Not your net worth, not your liquid worth, not the total value of what you own, not the true size of the brokerage account, not the actual number sitting in real estate, private deals, retirement accounts, business equity, cash, or anything. I do not mean you should lie. I dislike lying. Lies rot the person telling them. I mean you should understand that an exact number is a social weapon. And once you hand someone an exact number, you cannot take the weapon back. Here is why. The human mind is not good at processing wealth in absolute terms. It processes it relatively. If people vaguely believe you are maybe a little better than average, maybe stable, maybe comfortable, the relationship still has room to breathe. They can still treat you as a peer. They still feel inside the same emotional climate. The dinner bill is still just a dinner bill. The vacation conversation is still just a conversation. The favor is still a favor. The moment the actual number enters the room changes. Everything is measured against that number forever after. The gift you gave becomes small or large relative to that number. The house you bought becomes restrained or excessive relative to that number. The favor you declined becomes stinginess relative to that number. The boundaries you set become coldness relative to that number. You have given people a ruler, and the worst part is that many of them will use that ruler without even realizing it. I have lived in the same house for a very long time. I drive practical cars, I dress plainly, I eat breakfast at the same uncomplicated place more often than people think a billionaire should. Some people interpret that as eccentricity. It is not eccentricity. It is filtration. It is one of the cheapest and most powerful force fields in the world. When your life does not announce a number, people are forced to interact with your mind, your character, your habits, your actual presence. They may underestimate you. Good underestimation is one of the gentlest luxuries a successful person can have. The world wastes so much less energy on you when it is not busy pricing you. And believe me, everybody is pricing you, not just socially, commercially. Every lawyer, contractor, vendor, consultant, broker, realtor, seller, service provider, and opportunist on earth is always trying to infer your reservation price. What can this person afford? What will they tolerate? What can I quote without losing them? Your visible life is information, your watch is information, your shoes are information, your neighborhood is information, your vacation references are information, your casual remarks about having done well recently are information. Most negotiations are not won by the person with the most money. They are won by the person who appears to need a good deal the most. That is why quiet wealth beats loud wealth so often. Loud wealth tells the other side too much. Quiet wealth preserves optionality. If someone asks how you are doing financially, you do not owe them the number. You owe them nothing beyond politeness. Doing okay is enough. Things are fine. Just complicated is enough. A lot is tied up right now is enough. It is not deceit. It is containment. The number belongs to you. Do not hand it away just because someone asked brightly enough. The second thing you must never share is a plan that does not yet exist in the world. Never announce an unfinished move. Not the business before it has traction. Not the investment before it is built. Not the pivot before it is secured. Not the strategy before it has become reality. People get this wrong constantly because they confuse talking about a plan with advancing the plan. Sometimes it feels that way. You tell people what you are building, they get excited, they praise you, they tell you how brilliant it sounds, and your brain rewards you as if you have already earned something. That is dangerous. You can get paid in emotion for work you have not done yet. And once the emotional payment arrives, the real work often begins to feel heavier because the fantasy part has already been enjoyed. I have watched this happen to smart people over and over again. They announce too early, get the social dopamine, enjoy the admiration, begin carrying themselves like somebody who has already changed his life. And then the private labor required to make it real starts feeling less urgent, less clean, less internally necessary. The applause substituted for a piece of the actual accomplishment. That is one level of the problem. There is another, the moment you speak a plan aloud too early, you invite opinions into a stage where opinions can still hurt it. Objections, warnings, mockery disguised as realism, concern disguised as love. People telling you why it will not work, why the timing is wrong, why the market is too crowded, why your background is not ideal, why someone else tried something similar and failed. Most of those comments do not come from bad intent. They come from fear. But once fear enters a fragile early-stage idea, it can do real damage. Doubt is cheap to plant and expensive to remove. This is why I've always admired builders who stay almost irritatingly quiet until the thing is real. They let the work gather mass in silence. They do not invite judgment until judgment can no longer stop them. By the time the world hears about it, it already exists. There is now something harder than opinion in the room, which is reality. That is the right order. Build first, explain later, if at all. There is also a competitive reason for this. Information is currency. If you are accumulating something, structuring something, negotiating something, studying a niche, exploring a market, or building a position that benefits from being quiet, every unnecessary sentence weakens your edge. People have an almost magical confidence that the one person they tell will surely keep the information contained. Information does not behave that way. It migrates, it reshapes itself. It gets carried farther than you intended and sooner than you expected. I have made some of the best moves of my life because I was willing to hold an idea in silence long enough for it to become a position instead of a story. The return often lives inside the silence. The third thing you must never share is your edge. Your edge is whatever specific asymmetry allows you to get paid better than average, invest better than average, buy better than average, negotiate better than average, or spot value faster than average. Maybe it is a niche industry understanding. Maybe it is a process. Maybe it is a way of reading behavior. Maybe it is a discipline others do not have. Maybe it is a framework you built slowly over 10 years of careful mistakes. Whatever it is, if it consistently gives you better odds than the crowd has, then it is not casual conversation material. It is intellectual property. People misunderstand markets. They think wealth comes mainly from effort. Effort matters, but effort by itself is rarely enough. The real money is made when you see something other people are not seeing, or when you are willing to do something they are too emotional, lazy, or distracted to do. That difference between what you know and what they know, or between what you do and what they do, is the edge. And edges disappear once they are crowded. That is not cynicism. That is how a genuine asymmetry is the source of the opportunity. The moment the asymmetry becomes common knowledge, the opportunity begins collapsing. People are always amazed that this is true in stocks, in real estate, in business, in pricing, in deal flow, in labor markets, in content, in almost everything. But of course it is. The moment everybody knows where the dollar is lying on the sidewalk, the dollar gets picked up. That is why I always smile when somebody says they are going to teach the exact secret that made them rich. Sometimes they are sincere. More often they are monetizing the audience because the underlying edge is already maturing, already exhausted, or never existed in the form they claim. If I truly found a gold mine with years of high-grade ore still available, my instinct would not be to run a seminar about the map. My instinct would be to keep digging. That is the correct instinct. Your edge is the recipe. It is not the brochure. The greatest businesses in the world protect recipes, formulas, processes, customer data, decision frameworks, procurement relationships, timing, and methods with absurd seriousness because they understand that once the recipe leaves the vault, margin follows it out the door. Treat your own financial and strategic methods the same way. If something genuinely works for you, if it produces a real advantage, if it has allowed you to buy better, sell better, structure better, earn better, then stop treating it like a conversation starter. It is not a personality trait, it is one of your assets. The fourth thing you must never share freely is what happens to your money after you die. This one makes people uncomfortable because it sounds severe. Good, it should. Most people are far too loose with this subject and then act stunned when family life begins rearranging itself around anticipated money. If you love your children, do not let them build their adult identity around a known inheritance. Do not let them know the number. Do not let them know the proportions. Do not let them know the sequencing. Do not let them begin unconsciously measuring their own ambition against a future pile they have not earned. People underestimate how much knowing changes the person who knows. You do not need a child to become lazy in a cartoonish way for inheritance knowledge to do harm. It can be subtler than that. The urgency softens. The appetite for discomfort falls. The tolerance for failure changes. The need to build muscles through necessity weakens. The private voice that says, "I must figure this out because no one is coming," begins to disappear. That voice, unpleasant as it is one of the greatest producers of capability in the world, Do not remove it cheaply. I have long believed that a parent should aim to leave children enough to do anything, but not enough to do nothing. That line has been quoted often enough that people forget what gives it power. It is not mainly the amount. It is the timing of the knowledge. A child who suspects there may someday be helped behaves very differently from a child who knows the account size, knows the structure, knows the likely transfer, and has quietly begun rearranging his life around the expectation. That expectation is poison. And even when it does not ruin drive, it can still ruin relationships. Because once money becomes explicit inside a family, it is almost never heard as merely money. It is heard as meaning. Who matters more? Who is trusted? Who was forgiven? Who was rewarded? Who disappointed? Who has already received too much? Who has been quietly favored all along? Even if your reasons are perfectly sensible, the human heart does not process estate logic the way a tax lawyer does. It hears rankings. It hears verdicts. It hears old injuries being priced. That is why families split over money that has not even moved yet. The damage is often done long before death. During the years of anticipation, people begin positioning, they begin testing, they begin narrating fairness. The warmth in the family becomes contaminated by invisible arithmetic. Why would you invite that into your final years? You should have a proper estate plan, of course. You should discuss it fully with your spouse, your attorneys, your advisors, the narrow trusted circle of people whose job is implementation. But your broader family does not need a running commentary. They need to know you have handled things responsibly. They do not need the number, the categories, the side letters, the percentages, or the spreadsheet. Let their life be built on their own weight. If one day a surprise comes, let it arrive as a bonus to an already fully lived life, not as the central gravity around which that life has been quietly orbiting for 30 years. The fifth thing you must never share casually is the good you do. This one may sound strange because we live in a culture that increasingly believes virtue should be documented like exercise. Every donation becomes content. Every act of generosity becomes a post. Every private kindness threatens to vanish unless somebody photographs it, captions it, and gets credit for having done it. I have always distrusted that instinct. Not because public generosity is always fake. It is not. Sometimes publicity does inspire other people. Sometimes visibility genuinely helps a cause. But there is a spiritual and strategic cost to making goodness too visible. My father believed strongly in what he called the inner scorecard. The idea was simple enough to sound almost childish, and wise enough to govern an entire life. Are you living by what you know to be right, or by what other people will clap for? Are you using the internal ruler, or are you waiting for the crowd to hand you one? Money makes this distinction especially important. If you help somebody privately, and nobody knows, then the act changes you in one way. It becomes evidence that your character does not depend on applause. It strengthens your relationship with yourself. It tells you that when no one was watching, you still chose the better thing. That is real moral capital. If you help somebody and your brain gets rewarded with attention, admiration, and identity reinforcement, then the act may still be good, but it becomes mixed. Some of the return has shifted from helping the person to feeding the image. I dislike mixed incentives. I prefer clean motives. There is also a practical reason for silence here. A reputation for generosity, once made too visible, creates expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement very quickly. People who never would have asked begin asking. People who would have figured things out begin waiting. People who have no right to your resources begin building private cases in their own mind for why the next visible act of kindness should point in their direction. Public virtue is expensive. Private virtue is efficient, and efficient goodness is underrated. I would go one step further. I do not think you should talk much about your struggles, either, especially financial struggles, strategic uncertainty, pressure points, or fear, except inside a carefully chosen circle. This is not because vulnerability is weak. Vulnerability can be noble in the right context, but in economic life, pressure points are information. Desperation is information. Urgency is information. If the wrong people know where you are soft, what you are worried about, what you need, what timeline is closing on you, they can use it whether they mean to or not. The calm person at the table has a huge advantage, not because he has not turned those problems into public pricing data. Now let me bring all 5 principles together, because what sits beneath them is one single operating philosophy. Real wealth compounds best in low-friction environments. That is true financially, socially, emotionally, and strategically. Every unnecessary revelation creates friction. The number creates friction. The unfinished plan creates friction. The edge creates friction. The inheritance conversation creates friction. The publicized goodness creates friction, and friction in a compounding system is devastating. A little friction, repeated for years, changes the whole final outcome. It is the difference between building a life that feels clear and building one that constantly has to manage social consequences of information that never needed to escape in the first place. Most people do not realize how much of their life energy is spent managing reactions. Reactions to what they bought, reactions to what they earn, reactions to what they are planning, reactions to what others think they should do, reactions to what somebody now expects, reactions to a number spoken carelessly 3 years ago. Silence is not just protection of money, it is protection of bandwidth. That is why I do not confuse silence with isolation. Silence does not mean nobody knows anything. It means the circle is small, earned, and functional. Your spouse usually belongs inside that circle. Your most trusted advisors belong there. Perhaps 1 or 2 tested people in your life whose discretion and judgment have been proven over years. That is enough. More than enough. Usually, most people suffer not because they shared with the wrong monster, but because they shared with too many ordinary people. Ordinary people are more than enough to create extraordinary friction. There is one more thing I want to say because I think it is the cleanest summary of the entire philosophy. The strongest signal of genuine wealth is the absence of performance. The loudest rich people I have known were often the weakest underneath. The quietest rich people I have known were often made of steel. The first group needed to be seen because the seeing was part of the product. The second group did not need to be seen because the thing they were building existed, whether anyone admired it or not. You can feel the difference in a room. One person needs you to know. The other does not care whether you guess correctly. That indifference is not coldness, it is freedom. A person who is comfortable being underestimated is usually very hard to manipulate. A person who needs to be recognized is usually easy to lead by the nose. This is why I have always believed the quiet ones win. Not because they are timid, because they understand that the mouth, left unmanaged, can undo what the mind and the years worked very hard to build. So protect the number, protect the unfinished plan, protect the edge, protect the estate, protect the good you do, not because you are afraid of the world, because you understand how the world works, and because some of the most valuable things in life only remain valuable while they remain yours.